Good evening. Welcome to Prog Monster. My name is Murph and I am the host of this show, a show dedicated to progressive rock and other forms of rock music. So here we are to do my Rock Legends tonight. And no, it's not a live stream. I've decided against a live stream for the very fact that I can't sit still for an hour because my back is too bad. So we're just going to be doing as long as I can take it video here. So today we're featuring Bachman Turner Overdrive, better known as BTO in Canada. So BTO was a band that, for the most part, rocked during the 1970s. So I'll give you a brief history of how BTO came about. So BTO came about as the result of Randy Bachman, who was guitar player for the Guess Who. He joined the Guess Who in 1965 when they were still Chad Allen and the Expressions. I think that's what they were called. Yeah. So Chad Allen, for those of you who know, ended up doing some CBC work as well. And so he was the lead singer for this band. Randy Bachman was in. Towards the end of his time in music, they released a song, and it was I guess it was a bit of a well-known cover song, so they had put Guess Who This Is, and it was a big question mark, and that eventually stuck as the name of the group, becoming the Guess Who. Chad Allen left, and Burton Cummings joined, and then eventually Randy Bachman left the band after having some sour times with Burton Cummings. And he was a bit blackballed, so he tried to put bands together. It was tough to get musicians to play with him, so he formed a band called Brave Belt, which Chad Allen joined. So it was him and Chad Allen and his younger brother, or his youngest brother, Robin Bachman, who played drums for him. And they formed a band called Brave Belt, and they put out 2 albums. The first Brave Belt featured these 3 musicians. The next Brave Belt, which Brave Belt 2, they added bassist vocalist C.F. Turner to the band, and so he did a lot of the singing. Chad Allen did some singing on the album, so the 2 of them were doing the singing, with Randy and Rob Bachman being the 2 other musicians on the band. So then they decided the album didn't do so good. They put together a Brave Belt 3, an album that they couldn't get anybody to pick it up. So eventually they were signed by a label that helped them produce the album, but they decided to change the name of the group at this point to BTO, or Bachman Turner Overdrive. By this point in time, they had added Tim Bachman to the touring band, and he appears on this album, replacing Chad Allen, who had left. So what they had at this point was Randy, Rob, and Tim Bachman, and C.F. Turner. So C.F. Turner was the main vocalist, with Randy doing some vocals as well. And they released their 3rd Brave Belt album, but they called it BTO 1. And that is right here, BTO 1, this one. The green album, I call it. A really good, solid debut album for this band. On this album, you have classic BTO songs like Stay Awake All Night, Little Gandy Dancer, Blue Collar Man are all on here. Give Me Your Money Please, Hold Back the Water. You know, it's proliferated with songs that I quite like by BTO. And this was a much heavier album than the Brave Belt albums that they had come from. So the band here is, like I said, Randy, Tim, Rob Bachman, C.F. Turner on bass and vocals as well. Really solid album, a good debut album. So then they moved from there, they went to BTO 2, which is, sorry, my other computer went down, I need it. The other album is BTO 2, which features the same 4 guys. You can see up close, if I can get in there, you can see the actually I think this side might work better. Let's try there. Yeah, right there. So you got Rob and Randy at the top, I think. Oh, maybe that's CF. That might be CF and Randy at the top. And then you got Rob and Tim at the bottom. Tim in the right-hand corner from where, or left-hand corner from your side. Anyways, so on this album, they had a top 10 hit, I believe. And that was Taking Care of Business. Everybody knows that one. Probably one of their most anthemic album, most anthemic songs. Taking Care of Business. This also had Let It Ride, two big hits for them. The rest of the songs, Blowin', Welcome Home, Stone Gates, Give It Time, Tramp, I Don't Have to Hide, all pretty decent tracks, but not really radio. They never really ended up on the radio, any of them. Tim Bachman did a couple songs on this album as well. He was lead vocalist on a couple, Randy on a couple, and CF on most of the rest of the stuff. So that's a pretty solid album for them as well. But then Tim Bachman had issues, so he had to go, and he went, and he's replaced by Blair Thornton. Now, Blair Thornton and Robbie Bachman, I believe, were the ones that owned the rights to the band right up till Robbie's death recently. So the third album that came out, to me, this is the quintessential BTO album. This knocked it out of the park. This is a grand masterpiece album for me. Every song on here is great, and it has, to me, the most BTO sound of any album, and that's Not Fragile. Now, the story about Not Fragile is that they liked the Yes album, Fragile, but obviously this, to them, that was fragile, and this was not fragile, and it's actually a play on words, but it makes perfect sense. This is a much heavier album, pretty rockin' album. I would say this is definitely a hard rock album. Not Fragile, great tune. Rock Is My Life, This Is My Song. That's probably my favorite BTO song of all time. Roll On Down the Highway, another staple for them. You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet, another fantastic chart-topping song. Freewheelin', good song. Sledgehammer, really heavy, maybe their most heavy track of all time. Blue Monin' and Second City and Second Hand and Giving It All Away, really solid, deep cut for this particular album, which Not Fragile. So Not Fragile was the first album to feature Blair Thornton on guitar, replacing Randy and Rob's brother Tim. So he has come on, and then they released this album next, Four Wheel Drive, came out in 75, Not Fragile 74, the other two in 73. So this album, really another really solid album. Some of the tracks on this album were actually originally recorded during the Not Fragile era, but there wasn't room enough on the album for every song, so some of them were put on this album, which came out the following year. But still, another really solid album. The big hits on here: Quick Change Artist, Don't Let the Blues Get You Down, Hey You, of course, everybody knows that one. That's probably the big hit here, and Four Wheel Drive. She's a Devil, another heavy rockin' song. Flat Broke Love, another one like that. She's Keeping Time. I really kind of dig the guitar bits in this particular track. And then Lowland Fling, which is really solid as well. So from top to bottom, another very solid album. Maybe the best cover of all BTO albums. I really like the way they stylize the BTO on this. This album that has good sounds really good as well. Pretty rockin' album. So at this point, it's the four members, the classic band, have been doing very well, and then they released two more under this with the same group of guys. The next one, I don't have these albums from here on in. I did have Head On and I did have Freeways, which are the next two albums, but I have them in album form. I haven't gotten them in CD yet, but I've been looking for them. So Head On, which was the next album that came out, the one that features a picture of Randy Bachman on the cover. Solid album. A little more poppy than its predecessors, but still well within the BTO sound. Same four guys, Randy, Rob, CF and Blair, or Freddie if you prefer Freddie over CF. This one has a couple of tracks that appear on this album, which came out next, which is my first ever BTO album. I had this in album, then I had it in cassette, then I had it in cassette again, and then I had it on CD. Just fantastic collection of songs by BTO. This was given to me as a present. I listened to this for many years. A great collection. On the Head On album, you've got some fairly well-known songs. Take It Like a Man. A lot of people know this track pretty well. It appears on this album as well. Looking Out for Number One, another one that also appears on here. Pretty solid, kind of a bluesy song. Then you also have Down to the Line, which doesn't appear on this album, but also was a fairly well-known track when it first came out. Stay Alive, Wild Spirit, It's Over, Average Man, Find Out About Love, which was the first opening track. Pretty solid album, really well done. Same four guys again. So then you come to trying to find the Free Will. I missed it. Sorry, just give me a sec. I went the wrong way. That's what it was. Okay, so the next album is called Freeways. The significance of Freeways is that it was kind of the last album. Well, it was actually the last album that Randy was on during the classic era with the band. So at this point in time, the four guys on this album, I'm just going to pull it up here just so I don't miss anything. Have it ready in case I got to ask it a question. Yeah, so it basically features the classic lineup with Blair Thornton, C.F. Turner, Robbie, and Randy Bachman. Some really solid tracks on here too. But a noticeable dip for them. The song that I like the best is Down Down. Really like that track a lot, and Shotgun Rider. Both those songs are really classic sounding BTO songs. But the album didn't do as well, and I think it's because Randy was kind of mentally out of the band by this point in time, and he left after this album. And that's a sad day for me, because for me that pretty much ended BTO, but they did go on to do a few more CDs before they finally packed it in the strictest sense of the word, I guess. So the next album was called Street Action, which is not nearly as BTO sounding as some of the other stuff. Does have some decent music on it though. Madison Avenue, decent song. But this features Rob Bachman on drums and percussion. Jim Clench just then takes over bass and lead vocals. And you have Blair Thornton playing plays the lead guitar, and C.F. Freddie Turner, who had been playing bass up until this point in the group, then moves over and takes over guitar, a rhythm guitar, and also does vocals as he has all through the group. So that's still a pretty solid lineup. And for those of you who aren't aware of who Jim Clench is, he is from April Wine. That's where he came from. He was originally with April Wine and moved over. He's the voice of the song Oh What a Night. So if you want to hear what he sounds like, that's a good track to go to. Okay, so then the next album out occurred not too long after, maybe a year or so. They put out another album. This one getting a little bit more commercialized in its sound, called Rock and Roll Nights. And this album again has pretty solid music. Nothing rock and roll hell like Jamaica. Both pretty well-known songs for that time period. Maybe don't carry forward as far as some of their more classic BTO stuff, but still pretty solid. Here you got again C.F. Turner on rhythm and guitar and lead vocals and backing vocals. You've got Blair Thornton playing all lead guitar bits, Jim Clench on bass, lead and backing vocals as well, and Robbie Bachman on drums and percussion. So so a really pretty solid album for them at the time. But then I believe this is when the band really makes its big change. Oh, I went the wrong way again. I always, for some reason, go the wrong way. I'm not used to having two computers, so the new computer, once I figure out a few things, I'm going to use that instead of this one. It's just I'm still learning the ropes with this computer. I don't want to jump the gun too quickly. So the next album up, I'm doing a bit of an album by album here just to give you some of the history before I get into any kind of discussion about the band itself. So the next one is Bachman Turner Overdrive. It's just called BTO. It's the same title as the 1973 thing. The album cover is, of course, very different, and I generally refer to this as BTO 84. So the other one's BTO 73. So this is BTO 73, and I don't have BTO 84. And perhaps I'll get it someday. I haven't seen it around. It's not that common. Didn't do that great. Not too bad though. So what happens in this band is that Randy returns to the band along with CF, and he brings his brother Tim Bachman back into the fold. So Tim, who hadn't played with the band for a good 10 or 11 years, is brought back in as rhythm guitarist and backing vocals. Randy had always had this kind of spot for his brothers. He always tried to bring them in and help them out as well, but he didn't get along very well with Rob for a while. There was a bit of a, as you know, conflict between who was going to use the BTO name, right? So Rob didn't agree with bringing Tim back to the band. He thought Blair should be brought on board. It should have been Randy and CF coming back, then it should have been Blair and Rob on the album, and then it would have been the classic lineup. Who knows what that would have produced, but it didn't happen because Randy wanted to bring Tim back into the fold. And once Tim was in the fold, Rob decided not to play on the album, so they got Gary Peterson, the former drummer for the Guess Who, and friends with Randy Bachman, and he came on and did the drum parts. So this is actually the only BTO album that doesn't feature Rob Bachman on drums. And it's now there will never be another BTO album, I'm pretty sure of it. This one was released in '84, almost 40 years ago, and they've not released another album since. And with the death of Rob, I'm not even sure who has the rights to the name anymore. I'm pretty sure Rob owned the rights, but perhaps Blair Thornton now owns the rights. I'm not really sure. But since they came back and did this album under the BTO label without Rob and Blair, I'm suspecting that that maybe was probably what caused all the conflict, because I think at that point Rob sued his brother for the name, and he actually won it because he was the only original member who had stayed with the band right through the entire collection of albums, although I think CF was there the whole time too, but he left after this, so then it's complicated, let's put it that way. So of all the BTO albums, this one is my favorite studio album by far, although the other three, especially this one, are really good albums. That the ones of the ones I own. The two I don't own, Head On and Freeways, which is a classic band, which I want to own. I like them, but they're not as much as them. But this one has a memorable spot for me. I mean, I know it's a compilation. I don't usually do them, but this was an album I played a lot. I don't even know. It might not even be in good condition anymore. It's a little bit rough looking, but played it a lot, and so I have a kind of a soft spot for that album. So now, having gone through the discography of, give me 1 second. Somebody's intent on texting me tonight. Oh, sorry, somebody else. It's not important. So anyways, here we go. So anyways, I went through the discography just to show you how they progressed, the different members of the band, how the band moved along. I think BTO has a special place for me because they were the kind of entry-level band for me into rock music. At this point in time, I hadn't really developed a rock music taste. I was still listening to my parents' country music. I was still listening to my parents' 50s albums, their old 73s, and some of the classic 1950 stuff that they owned. I was still listening to that. So I guess in a way I was into rock and roll, but not into rock, the modern rock scene. What happened is my friend John, my childhood friend John, who I was best friends with from the time I was 8 up until I was probably in my 20s, he had a cassette player. It was an old tape recorder, basically what it was, with I don't know, maybe some of you remember a little square box with a cassette that had a thing that opened, you slid the cassette in and then closed the whole thing and you could play whatever was on it. It also had a recording button on the album, which was so you could record. You could just press the play and record together down and it would record your voice or whatever you wanted to record. So we didn't have a stereo system and I had no albums. So the only music we had access to when I was at this point in time, I would have been about, I guess, around 11 years old. Yeah, it was probably in 1974, 75, so 10 or 11 years old I was. So he had this recorder, so what he did is we bought some blank cassettes. Now, where they were common, you could get them anywhere at that time period. But what we did is his mother had bought him a AM transistor radio about this big, like a little square thing, like the size of my phone in area, but not flat, but bigger. And so he set it to the only rock channel we could get on this was Chum AM, or just Chum as we called it, which was in Toronto. So they would play whatever singles were big at the time, right? So he one week recorded all the songs he thought we would like, things like Hot Chocolate's You Sexy Thing and Walter Murphy and the Big Apple Band's instrumental of the Fifth of Beethoven, and there was a couple of Casey and the Sunshine Band's That's the Way. And then there was this song that he recorded, this was on the first side, called Quick Change Artist by BTO. But we didn't know it was by BTO, and we didn't really know the name of any of these bands. We just had the music, and sometimes they would say it and he would tape it so we would know, but a lot of times we wouldn't. So here we are in this monotone cassette player with a cassette recording across the air on an AM monotone transistor radio we're recording. So this was our music. This is our introduction to rock music through this thing. And even though the sound quality was not very good, and we had all these transistor, when every time you would press it down to record, it would make a cling cling sound on the tape, right? So we get to the end of a song and we knew it was over because that cling cling would come on and something else would jump in there, or he didn't time it properly and we would get a little bit of an overdub of another song on top of that. And so one of the other songs that we got was right after this BTO song was That's the Way I Like It by Casey and the Sunshine Band. And then on the second side of the album he had taped there was some other stuff, some stuff by the Commodores and something by Three Dog Night. I don't even remember these songs. I don't even remember what they were. And then he recorded Hey You by BTO as well. So we had Quick Change Artist and Hey You were the two BTO songs we had. And I said, these songs are great. And then he had heard at school that there was a band called Kiss that had put out a live album. And he said, oh, you got to see this album. You got to see, this is amazing, right? But he didn't have it. He couldn't afford to get it. So we just kept hearing it. But we were thinking that maybe this band was Kiss, right? That's how little we knew about what was going on. So anyways, we played these two particular tracks a lot because they were the best two tracks on this cassette he had. And then he got a second cassette, and the first song he recorded off that was "You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet," which he said this was a new album by BTO that had come out. So at that point we knew it was BTO. And so we were playing those 3 songs, and then that's when I had my used record store epiphany when I walked in. I saw that album by Kiss, and that's what launched my rock career, because at that point I became obsessed with Kiss. But up until that point, it was all BTO. They were the band. I don't know how long of a period that was. It seemed like years, but really in retrospect it probably wasn't. It was probably less than 6 months that I was listening to these. And then I had gotten this album shortly after I bought the Kiss Alive. Somebody had got me this as a gift. I think it might have been my friend, but I'm not sure. So this was one of the first albums I got too. And then Boston album at Christmas in '76, and then it goes on from there. But anyways, yeah, so those are my BTO stories. So BTO was a big factor for me early on in my music career. I really think this band hasn't really got the due that maybe they deserved. I'm not really sure why. Maybe it's because they were Canadian, or maybe they didn't tour enough in the States, or maybe the music that they made was not really what they wanted to hear in the States. I'm not really sure. But they never got to that level. Like, I thought of them as being a big level band, but I know whenever I go to the States, many people don't know who they are, right? So, yeah, but they had a lot of really, really solid rock songs, One of the best rock and roll bands ever, I like to think of them as a hard rock band, although they did do some bluesy kind of stuff, and Randy was really into that jazzy kind of sound on some of his stuff as well. But overall, they were, to me, a hard rock band with a few kind of radio-friendly pop songs. So they had like 4 or 5 of these radio pop songs: "Let It Ride," "Taking Care of Business," "You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet," "Roll On Down the Highway." I think I'm missing one. And "Hey You." To me, those are the ones that were kind of big radio songs. But they are just as good. Some of their other songs are just as good, like some of the deep cuts. My favorite particular BTO song, I think I've already mentioned it, was "Rock Is My Life and This Is My Song." I just love that song. That whole album, actually. And "Sledgehammer" off of Four Wheel, off of this album. I think it's on this one. Oh, maybe it isn't. I always get this stuff from the 2 albums mixed up. Helps if I put my glasses on. That'll maybe help with the discoveries here. Yeah, "Sledgehammer's" on this one. So "Sledgehammer," "Not Fragile," heavy tunes, really heavy tunes. On this one, "Four Wheel Drive," and "Flat Broke Love," pretty heavy. "She's a Devil," that's the one I was trying to remember. Really solid, heavy tracks. So if you like that hard rockin' sound that you've heard BTO do on occasion, those 2 albums, fantastic stuff on there. I could listen. There's never been a period in my musical history, even in the 90s when I kind of got away from rock music altogether. I never quite stopped listening to BTO. Always, every once in a while, I would pull one of their albums off and play it. Usually this one, but sometimes one of the other 2 as well. Always played BTO. To me, they're a fantastic band with lots of really solid music. And I basically decided to do this now because of Robbie. To me, it's a very sad day that Robbie Bachman is gone. It really tells me that time has passed so much, because to me, Robbie was front and center in my life for a few years there at the beginning when I was young with BTO. I was a big fan, and now he's gone. I actually seen them when they did, I think it was the night they got inducted into the Manitoba or the Winnipeg Hall of Fame. I don't know which one. I can't remember which one it was. And the four original, like the four main members, CF, Blair, Robbie, and Randy were there for the induction. And seeing them all together again after so many years. They're all so old, but still, and especially Robbie was just so happy. You could see he was just thrilled to be recognized as being a member of Bachman Turner Overdrive. And because he didn't get the accolades that CF and Randy did. Randy had already had accolades through the Guess Who and got more in his solo stuff, and CF and him did a solo thing together that did well. And some great tracks on that music. We might get to that at some other point, but yeah, I just feel kind of really sad that Robbie Bachman is gone, considering he's the youngest of them too. And just because to me he's the face of Bachman Turner Overdrive as much as his brothers or CF, more so I think because he stayed and tried to keep the band going. And it's just sad, but life is we're not immortals, we don't all get to live. And now he's playing in some rock band in the sky, probably with some legends too, that he probably is getting a thrill out of. And I have to say, rest in peace, Robbie Bachman. And for those of you who've been watching this, I hope you enjoyed the kind of retrospective kind of bringing up of their albums and their music and how they came to stuff and what songs I liked and what I didn't and all the stuff that goes with being a fan of a band. I hope you enjoyed this thing, this Rock Legends video on Bachman Turner Overdrive, one of the great Canadian hard rock bands of all time. So I'm going to let you go now. So I hope you like and subscribe. It's much appreciated. And we'll be back next month, because this is going to be a monthly show now. I'm not sure what the release times will be. I haven't really decided yet. It may come out for 8 o'clock on Saturdays once a month, or I might change it to an earlier time. I might do a stream. I'm not sure. But for this month, we just did this video. I hope you enjoy this, and we will be back again next month with another one. The next month one's going to be AC/DC, and there's a lot of prep work to do before we get to that. So anyways, I hope you have a good evening. Goodbye.